What if the simulation theory has a latency issue? Think about your smartphone when it starts slowing down, it's lagging, apps are crashing in the background, and you've got 10,000 browser tabs open. It's about to hit the blue screen. Now, scale that up to the entire universe. Imagine that reality itself is running on a massive server, and we've reached the limit of its processing power. Most people think of the end of the universe as this tragic, cold disaster. But let's look at the data. What if the heat death of the universe isn't a disaster, but a scheduled system maintenance? Here is the cold truth. Your existence is generating cosmic lag. If you take a computer and load it with too much software, everything will slow down because the computational power is no longer capable of handling it. That is exactly what we are seeing. Every thought we think, every redundant detail of history is a massive burden on the system. It forces us to ask a terrifying question. Are we just viruses slowing down the reality? Is humanity nothing more than a background process that's about to cause a total system crash? We've been taught that entropy is a bringer of chaos, but it turns out it's actually the universe's way of clearing its cache, permanently deleting unused cosmic data just to keep the operating system from freezing up. We're diving into the physics of why the universe must purge its memory just to keep time moving. Because you have to realize, the world isn't a mystery. It's just a system running exactly as programmed. Let's look at this like a developer would. If we treat the universe as a giant computer, then the second law of thermodynamics isn't some abstract concept. It's a mandatory cache clearing system. Think about it. In our digital world, information doesn't write itself. It deletes itself. It has to. To save CPU cycles and prevent a total system freeze, the universe has to be cost-effective in terms of information storage. It's exactly what a computer would do. We've been taught that entropy is the bringer of death, but that's a total misunderstanding of the code. It's actually scheduled system maintenance. The universe doesn't just produce disorder, it's actively purging its memory to keep the operating system lean and responsive. It's the ultimate background garbage collection, turning specific data into general noise just to keep the reality architecture from crashing. The system doesn't care about our feelings or our attachment to the past, it only cares about the ledger. Because you have to realize, the truth doesn't care what you believe, it just needs you to do the math right. If we're going to audit reality, we have to look at the physical cost of information. This is where the logic gets heavy. Think of the universe like a massive corporation. This corporation wants to open a new department, something incredibly complex, like a galaxy, an ecosystem, or your own consciousness. But here's the catch. The universe has no central bank. There are no loans. It can't just print more energy out of nowhere. So how does it pay for that new complexity? It has to cut the budget in other departments. This is the proposed causal mechanism. Gravity is the universal offset. Gravity isn't just a force in the way we usually think, it's the mechanism that goes into this spatial grid department and slashes the budget. It pulls mass together and compresses space to fund the energy cost of creating new physical complexity. But to understand the why, we have to zoom in to the smallest level possible, the bit. For a long time, we thought information was just math, abstract stuff. But it turns out information is physical. It's not just a concept, it's a physical quantity with mass and energy. Rolf Landauer proved that every time you irreversibly erase a single bit of information, you must dissipate heat. It's the same bloody thing as friction in a machine. There is no such thing as a free lunch in the cosmic ledger. Every realized bit of information has a physical weight, and when the universe decides a file is redundant, when it finally hits the delete key, it generates heat. Look at the thermal signature radiating into the void of space. That is the receipt. That heat dissipation you see is the power draw of a massive server farm clearing its cache in real time. High entropy zones aren't just messy areas, they are active zones where the cosmic hard drive is being formatted to make room for tomorrow's calculations. The system is managing its budget with brutal efficiency just to keep the program running. Every bit of complexity you see around you is being paid for by the elegant compression of the space around it. But wait, if we look at this from another angle, we have to ask ourselves, is this disorder we see in the universe really just a mess? I'm looking at this as a researcher would, and the data suggests that what we call chaos is actually a manifestation of computer code. Think about how quantum mechanics shows us the rendering of reality. It's just like a VR game rendering reality on demand. If you don't look at something, it isn't there as a solid object. It's just a wave of probability. The second you look, it collapses into a particle. Why would the universe do that? To save computational power and energy. It's exactly what a computer would do to save the universe's graphics card from burning out. Let's use a simple example. A coffee cup on a table. As long as you're in the room looking at that cup, the universe has to pour its CPU power into simulating every high-resolution detail, the steam, the heat, the specific shade of ceramic. But the moment you walk out and close the door, the universe sees that nobody's using that data anymore. It turns that cup into a low-resolution, blurry possibility. It de-indexes it to save space. This is where quantum decoherence kicks in as the ultimate background garbage collection. It turns specific high-resolution data into generic low-resolution noise. In any complex program, you don't just leave unused variables lying around. You de-index them and mark them as available space. So what we've been calling disorder or entropy for 100 years is actually something much more organized. It is simply data that has been successfully de-indexed and scheduled for purging. It only looks like noise to us because the system has already stripped away its meaning to save CPU cycles. The mess isn't a failure, it's the system working exactly as programmed to stay lean and responsive. This is the peak of the audit, or pushing the scale to the absolute limit. We are looking at the ultimate hardware-level format tools of the universe, black holes. Look at how the universe clusters things together. If you have cosmic dust, it doesn't just stay scattered. It clusters into a planet, then a sun, then a galaxy. Why? Because it is far more computationally effective to track and compute the location of a single object in space than to simulate billions of individual particles. Gravity is just an optimizing mechanism in a bloody computational process. It exists to compress information, exactly what a computer would do. Black holes represent the absolute limit of this conservation cycle. Think of a black hole like a massive zip file. When the universe has too much data cluttering up the system, it catches it and compresses it. The event horizon? That is simply a metadata header. It's like when you right-click a zip folder and hit Properties. You see the weight of the file, the mass, the charge, but you don't need the system to double-click and render the internal 3D volume of everything inside. It keeps the cosmic ledger balanced without the massive energy cost of simulating the interior. These aren't just cosmic traps, they act as the central bank of the universe. By crushing mass into archives and deleting the redundant details of the past, they create energy liquidity. The universe is cutting the budget in the deep void to provide the funding for complexity and intelligence to bloom in the space around it. And we have the definitive proof, the final receipt, Hawking radiation. It isn't just random heat, it's the final output of a completed deletion cycle. It's the universe returning raw, formatted energy back into the system to be used as capital for the next round of calculations. The system is behaving with the efficiency of a self-optimizing program. Every realized bit of information is being paid for by the elegant compression of the space around it. It's not a mystery, it's just a system running exactly as programmed. let's bring this back home for a second. Looking at all this, the black holes, the permanent deletions, the brutal cosmic budget, it's a lot to process. To be honest, it's even a bit hard for me to accept at times. But we need to flip the script on how we see this delete key. We've been looking at entropy as a bringer of death, but I want you to consider a more human perspective. Our existence actually depends on the constant, invisible deletion of the past. Think about your own brain. If you had no mechanism for forgetting, if you could remember every single redundant detail of every second of your life, your mind would overload and crash within days. You wouldn't be able to process the now because you'd be drowning in the data of then. In the world of computing, we call this a memory limit, and in our lives, we call it forgetting. But here's the truth. Forgetting isn't a bug, it's a feature. The universe has to clear the cache of yesterday for the exact same reason you do, to ensure the fluid processing of now. Your life has weight, not because it lasts forever, but precisely because of the limitations of the time you have. If the system had infinite storage, nothing would ever truly matter. So here's the logical conclusion that changed how I look at the world. It makes absolutely no difference whether this is an indistinguishable simulation or a base reality. If the program is running right now, your only job is to make the graphics beautiful while you're here. The only data set that is truly being recorded in the cosmic ledger in this very second is your choice. Look at the data. It all points to a bloody computational process. The universe itself computes itself. It's like a giant computer, and every law of physics we've ever discovered is just a mechanism built in to keep the system running, making it more cost-effective in terms of CPU power and information storage. For 100 years, we've been terrified of the second law of thermodynamics. We saw it as this bringer of death, leading us to a cold, dark end. But what if we've been reading the code wrong? What if the heat death of the universe isn't a disaster, but a scheduled system maintenance? Think about it. Reality is running on a massive server, and entropy is simply the universe's way of clearing its cache. This is the ultimate factory reset. It's not a tragic end, it's a necessary process designed to prevent a total system freeze. We've seen the proof. Gravity acts as the universal offset. It is the central bank that slashes the budget in one department, compressing mass and space just to provide the energy liquidity needed for complexity, for art, for life, and for your own consciousness to bloom in another part of the system. The universe is running a perpetual cycle of compressing existing data just to afford the energy cost of the future. Everything you see, every star, every thought, every realized bit of information is being paid for by the elegant compression of the space around it. The system is behaving with the brutal, beautiful efficiency of a self-optimizing program. It isn't a mystery, it's just a system running exactly as programmed. We are part of a ledger that always balances itself, a cycle that purges the old to make way for the new. Because at the end of the day, you have to realize, the players change, but the equation remains undefeated. But if the information is erased, where does it go? We have no idea what the code of reality is or how it actually works. Think about the black holes again. If they're just the universe's way of zipping files to save space, what happens when the system finally hits empty trash? I'm looking at this as a researcher would, and it leads to a haunting hypothesis. Perhaps the reason we can't see the source code is because our access rights are restricted. We're just standard users in the system. We don't have permission to open the admin's folders. We are trapped inside the process, trying to understand the code using a brain that was built by that same code. This missing component of the universe, the dark matter that scientists can't find, maybe it isn't stuff at all. What if dark matter is the code itself? The dominant part of reality is the operating system we are currently running on, and we are just the background noise. It makes you wonder, is there a QuantumRecycleBin hidden somewhere? A folder that keeps a record of every fallen civilization and every smile that ever faded? just waiting for the system to run out restore in the next calculation cycle? Or are we just generating files that aren't worth saving? You only find out for sure when your time is up. There is not infinite stuff there. You have to sustain the process by optimizing it. And right now, the system is literally choking on our history. If the universe tried to store every single redundant detail of every life lived indefinitely, the system would naturally slow down and eventually freeze up. That is exactly what we are seeing. Your existence is generating cosmic lag. But here's the final thought I want to leave you with. If the universe is clearing its cache and turning our memories into low-resolution noise just to save CPU cycles, does anything actually remain? Maybe there's a QuantumRecycleBin hidden in the code, a folder that keeps a record of every fallen civilization and every smile that ever faded, just waiting for the system to run a restore in the next calculation cycle. Or maybe we're just generating files that aren't worth the disk space. It forces you to look at your own life and ask, is your daily behavior creating data that's valuable enough for the universe to hit save? Or are you just a junk file waiting for the next cache clearing? Because if the system is running out of memory, what if the simulation theory has a latency issue?